A decade ago, in the dark of the night, the people of Chibok in Borno State were soundly asleep, unaware of the impending horror that was about to unfold in their community. In the decade since the Boko Haram insurgents kidnapped nearly 300 students at an all-girls school in the town of Chibok, abductions have become a recurrent episode or a booming industry, I would say, in Nigeria, particularly or most especially in the restive northern part of Nigeria. April marks the 10th anniversary of the violent abductions of the girls from government secondary school Chibok, Borno State by Boko Haram insurgents. On Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue, we have Favor Aya, my co-host, who will be engaging on matters on a decade-old Chibok episode. Favor, you are aware of the happenings for 10 years now running. This Chibok episode now has actually thrown more light into or given more muscle to the abductors to engage in the northern part of Nigeria. Briefly, before we dive into the next phase of the show, let me know what opinion you have.
You know, when this happened 10 years ago, we thought it was just something that would come and go, but recently we've seen more and more abductions going on. It's even a business right now. Kidnappers are using it to raise ransom, collect ransom from people rather, and buy whatever it is that they need for the next movement. And I think that the Chibok incident was very massive. It went global. We saw people like the wife of the former US President Barack Obama. Yes, the wife, which is Michelle Obama. She promoted the hashtag, and so many people outside the country that went on campaigning that these girls should be brought back. But at the end of the day, not all of them came back. A good number of them are still there, and it is very bad because their parents, they don't know what the kids are suffering. They are no longer kids anyway. They are now adults because when they were kidnapped, most of them were around 15 to 16, so counted 10 years. So that's why I say that they're already adults, and it's sad that we don't know about their whereabouts or how they are faring.
Well, briefly, we heard it from Favor Aya. You'll do well to join us in the next phase of the show, but before you'll do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us across various social media platforms. Join us in the next phase of the show. Favor, actually, what do you have for me, and you and viewers out there?
You know, when the Chibok adoption happened and everything, it was as if it was subsided, and people thought that, oh, this might be the end of it all. This might be a once in a while thing, a once in a blue moon thing, but it's obvious it's become a culture and norm in today's society in Nigeria. It's been like an occurrence that keep going on, and we see it every time. School children, especially girls, being kidnapped and adopted in their classrooms. My very first question this morning is, what do you think about the adoption? Why do you think that over time these things have been occurring and the government, they have not really done something about it? Why is it prevalent?
Well, I'll begin by saying that it's complex and multi-layered. Let me start with that. Number one, we'll talk about the political will, whether it's there from the part of the government officials. Then we'll talk about how did it initially start and why has it been adopted, particularly in the northern region. Particularly in the 90s, we've been hearing of clashes between communities or communal clashes in the 90s. Okay. Kidnapping and abductions was dominant only in the South. But because it has become a business venture, a booming industry, now it has been adopted. That's why you hear kidnapping for ransom. Yeah. You heard of expatriates and foreign nationals working probably Chevron or Shell in the Niger Delta, and they are kidnapped. Why? Because their region was not being developed.
Yes.
That was the reason. So if abduction is taking place, there must actually be a reason or a cause. Now, what is the reason or the cause in the northern part of Nigeria? Negligence. Okay. Particularly because probably their schools are not well equipped. Take, for instance, now you're writing JAMB. Yeah. The score now in the south is different from the score in the north. And when you look at this, you weigh it side by side rather, you now begin to ask yourself some kind of questions. what actually defines the political will, starting from the local government, the state government, and also dictating to the federal government how to pass a message across to the people. Now, a situation whereby people are not well educated, well informed in the northern part of Nigeria, and then they have a slightest pinch of knowledge, they will go haywire. And that is exactly what is happening. We watched a brief documentary on the BBC how some kind of ills were uncovered. And a man practically, because of, the disturbing images, we will not play that video actually. Now, we saw how people were being macheted or beheaded. Why? Because the government has refused to answer to their plight, which is quite wrong. Now, secondly, we will now stick to what we call the economic hardship, which is now evident now. I initially began by stating the cause or the reason. It is partly because of negligence. What actually government is meant to deliver, they have failed to deliver. So they look for other sources of means of income. Now, if we now go over to the economic hardship, economically speaking, we can look at the rising inflation. The exchange rate now was initially 1,700 plus or 1,009. Now it's dropping at a bullish rate now, fighting hardly to drop down to 900. Now, even if you go to the black market now, it's 1,300. Now, when things like this begin to happen, it's hard to feed. It's hard to pay for basic bills such as food, shelter, and clothing. You now begin to devise all sorts of means. And the good book will say, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So when the devil begins to walk in that shop, which is the heart, all sorts of ill vices now are now born out of those intentions. And before you say, Jack, abduction now comes into play. And when this abduction comes into play, they begin to also establish a territory. Why? Because they need a size. Now, let's look at medieval times. If a particular nation, let's say England and Scotland, who were known for fighting back then, if the English people are more in number, the Scottish will only look for how to devise tactics to overpower the English people. Size matters. So it could be that now, I want to believe that in subsequent times running into the show now, we are going to key in focusing why actually girls have actually only been abducted, not the boys. So there could be an essence why they are mainly focusing on girls. Why? Because for the essence of production of children to establish a territory. And then they rope in these children at an early age, just as we're seeing in Rwanda, to constitute mayhem. So I'll say that's how the mass kidnapping has started, the reason, the cause, the political will.
Okay, that's quite an explanation. You said one of it is negligence. And the other thing is
negligence on the part of the government.
Yes, and economic hardship. You mentioned that, and you said something about why they kidnap or abduct girls in particular. So we are going to come to that later on. So right now, what I want to ask again: why is the Nigerian government finding it very hard to stop these abductors, these kidnappers? What do you think is the barrier that is holding them back from fighting these people?
You started by asking why it's been difficult for the Nigerian government to stall these kidnappings or abductions. Well, first of all, we'll ask ourselves who is saddled with the responsibility of securing lives and properties of the citizens. Now, these are the NSCDC, the DSS, Nigerian Army, Navy, paramilitary, and all sorts. Now, I'll begin by stating that state policing has actually been an agenda in which has been or a topic of discussion which has totally been neglected for a long period of time. Why? Because when state policing is adopted, they are able to relate with the locals. Now, if we go over to the US now, we have these security operatives who are also relating with people who cannot even get to the federal level. Let's use, for instance, the US. We have locals now within maybe a state like Oklahoma now. They are relating with the sheriff. They cannot get straight to Washington. So who will get across to Washington, particularly when it has to do threatening with areas of national security concerns? They will pass the message across to the NYPD or maybe Oklahoma Police Department, and then from there to the FBI, to the CIA. That is how it's addressed. Now, another thing is now the cohesion between the security operatives now. How well do they perform amongst themselves in joint task or joint efforts? Why? Because each force will want to show superiority over the other. We've seen squabbles between the Nigerian Army and the Nigerian police in a battle for supremacy. There was a time the NSCDC some years back, 10 years to be precise, or maybe 15 years to be precise, they were not armed with or furnished with weapons. But now, because they've been harassed over time, why? Because they do not respect their uniforms, they've decided to give them weapons. The moment they granted them weapons, whether it's a 9mm or AK-47, some respect came in. Years ago, before we were even born, the Nigerian police were not even furnished with guns, only batons. they were treated with levity, but the moment they were given guns, some level of respect came in. So it's a situation whereby people now I'm still coming to these guns and the gadgets they need to even use. Now, people now no longer respect them. Why? Because the sophistication of the weapons they are using are no match for some of these militants. That is where we now need to talk about advancement of gears and gadgets. And when you talk about the gears, the kind of boots they have, how well or how strong enough are they to enter different terrains? Now, the kind of guns they have, how many rounds can they shoot in a second? That's another thing. The torpedo, how far can the range go? That's another thing. These militants, they have them. Now, I don't know whether you've watched a film they call Eyes in the Sky.
No.
They have a drone in which they use in surveying the area. Now, how well do we have that in our Air Force? And how well educated are the operatives now to handle it? That's another question. Now, if all these things now are not addressed, militancy will still perpetuate. Then lastly, we should talk about another multifaceted issue, which has to do with the fractured faith local communities or locals have in security operatives. Now, this fractured faith now is a question whereby security operatives have undermined the efforts of everyone. Why? Because you run to the police, they say police is your friend, and you can't secure bail when bail is free, unless maybe you're a high-profile citizen. You're a citizen when you have money, and you belong to the masses when you're poor. That is the real fact here in Nigeria. So a situation whereby you're working with a lawyer who is a son, you're accorded more respect. So people will not want to even divulge information, and rather will remain dependent on one militant who is able to cater for a few with cheap means of resources. Why? Because of their inexposure. So these are the factors which will continue to perpetuate militancy.
Okay, you seem to be very well, very well acquainted with guns. You mentioned torpedo, whatever. Have you ever been there? I don't know.
I'm from Edo State, so
okay, so you know.
we have militants in
Have you handled one?
No, I've not handled one.
Okay. You
Don't
said
indict
it like
me,
you've
please.
been there, you've touched them, and you know how they work. And also, you said something about state police, and we've been re-emphasizing on this thing over and over again. I think it's something that the Senate they are working towards it. And just yesterday, I saw news where the IG of police said something about them being cautious because he has this feeling that the governors are going to hijack and abuse state policing.
That is another venture, because if we look at it, sitting governors on their own parts, they tend to turn to godfathers upon expiration of their 8 years and remain dominant in a state. I take my state, for instance, for example. We had Tony Aneni, who was a PDP stalwart. He was uprooted by Adams Oshomole, who came on board to become another godfather, and he was tactically kicked out by Obaseki. But how true Obaseki is going to become a godfather, we do not know. I'm using that as an analysis now to reflect.
Okay, but I think the federal government is actually strong-headed on this one, and they are going to work towards it, and hopefully we're going to achieve it, and then we'll look at what the governors are going to do with it.
But when it's being achieved, I think also there should be an amendment to the Constitution to state or define the roles of the state police and the limits of the state governors.
Exactly.
So I would like to throw one back at you, enough of bombarding me with the abductions.
Okay,
now.
come on,
Education now in the north now has been, it has been dropping drastically in the restive north. You have in the northeast, northwest, and north-south clashes between headers, banditry, which everything all encompassing has culminated into abductions. Now, particularly the girl child, what is the impact? Because the traumatic effects now those little children face upon abduction. I'd like to hear from you.
Okay, you said something about traumatic, and I'll start with traumatic. Yes, these children are facing a lot of trauma, the ones that have been adopted and the ones that are yet to be adopted. I said yet to because we don't even know what's going to happen.
So you're not a hopeful Nigerian that can stop?
We can see what's happening in the country already. So we start with trauma. Most of them are traumatized. The ones that were adopted and eventually came home, most of them were raped. Most of them even came back with babies.
That's judging from this image now, from the hotbeds and the mass school kidnappings in Nigeria.
They came back with babies. Imagine having a child of an adopter, someone that maltreated you, and those things are living in their head. They feel bad because of what was done to them, and everything, all those trauma is living with them, and even the fear of the unknown. What is going to happen to us? Where do we go from here? They came back hopeless. They were drained of their potentials. They came back empty. Most of them, they don't know what to start from again, rather. even going to school is not an option because the school is not a safe environment anymore. You don't want to be there because that's the very point you were adopted. So what am I going back there to go and do again? So first of all, I said that they have been traumatized. The fear of everything, fear of the unknown, fear of they just want to be left alone and they don't want to go back to school anymore because they feel that school is not a place for them. School is not where a girl child should be because most times we have heard about adoption. We have not heard about schoolboys being adopted. It's always the girls. So they feel like they are endangered species. They don't want us to be here. So what do? We stay away from that environment. And in the future, what does this cause? We see people that they are not developed personally. They lack development, so they don't know their left to their right. They lack let me say basic knowledge, and this what affects the growth of the country and also the potentials that have been halted. Let me say halted because they might still go somewhere later on in the future, but for now they are being halted. They are made stagnant. They are not growing, and these are knowledge potentials that the country needs to grow, but then they are being stopped right there. So talking about going back to school, that one is no longer an option because even if they wanted to, their parents will no longer allow them because they are afraid of what will happen. Imagine when you are sending your child to school and you have I don't know, are they going to come back today? Because it happens every day. Adoption in Nigeria now happens every day. You know, when the one of Chibok happened, it was a one big thing that happened. Like people were surprised. Like myself, I've never heard of something like that except for the first time it happened in Chibok. So people didn't even see that it's going to be happening over and over again. So parents in the north do not want to send their girl child to school these days because they are afraid of what will happen. And coming to that the part of the parents, I think that most of them, if not all, are traumatized. Why? Because the ones that didn't come back, you don't know what your child is doing. You don't even know if she is dead or alive. You don't know the condition of your child. And I think some parents actually prefer that you bring back the corpse of their child and they are being buried in their compound and they know, oh, Deborah is dead, Miriam is dead, and they are sure about it. But when you don't know, is my child alive or what is she doing now, what is happening to her, it becomes very traumatic. So I think one of the effects of this on both the child and the children rather, and the parents is that it leads to trauma and they now avoid education totally.
Okay, going forward, this is just off the track. There's a saying, when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. If I may borrow the biblical explanation of the name Sarah, mother of many nations, is the woman who actually gives birth to the child. So a situation whereby a girl child now has been hindered or prevented from accessing not just education alone, good quality education here. What now is the toll effect now on the nation at large and even the parents? Because charity begins at home. And once you don't or you're not able now to instill knowledge and good quality education on that girl child or denying her that good quality education, there's always going to be a setback, not just on the parents if charity has to begin at home, but the nation at large. We look at, for instance, the likes of this lady in the Middle East, Malala, who was shot the other time. She was also spearheading the Bring Back Our Girls hashtag.
Yes.
Now, if a lady like that now can defy all odds to come out and speak up, how much more the likes of, we have Aisha Yusufu here, but how well can other ladies be more livered or more gingered like these folks now? And what will be the impact now on the Nigerian government?
I like you said, women are very important in society, whether we believe it or not. They are very important because when they want to pursue something, they are specific about it. And when you see a woman that is determined to get something, she's definitely going to get it. She would defy all odds to get that thing. I can say that for the men folks, sorry. But I think there is always the zeal.
Are you a chauvinist?
No, sorry. There's this zeal, there's this enthusiasm in women when they want to get something, because you imagine when you feel that you were not privileged to get something, and somehow you were able to lay your hands on it. You are going to like
Harness it.
That's the word. You're going to hijack it and make good use of it. Unlike I think the boys folk, the men's folk, they are very privileged, so everything is left was brought to them, being brought to them on a platter. So they just feel like, oh, we already have it, whether we want it or not, it's there for us. But the girl child knows that this is an opportunity for me. It comes once in a while. So what do I do with it? I make good use of it. So I think that educating the girl child goes a long way in helping the development of any country. And when we get the opposites, we also get the opposite result of it. The country diminishes in its economic development. We've seen people that have imparted. We have we have Okonji Iweala. These people are like, they are phenomenons outside there, and they have no competition. They are very exceptional. So that's to tell you the capacity and the power of a girl child. So these people, these adopters, one, they know that this is what these people possesses, and they try to hurt it. They say that education is not is haram. I don't know how they say education is haram for Boko Haram, but then why is it haram for just the girl child? There is a reason to that. And another reason why they go after the girl child is that they actually need help. Most of them want children, and they need people that will be doing chores for them. So that's another part of it.
Well, we've heard it from Favor, who has made us understand on a jovial note that it's a man's world and the women run the world. Well, for the abductions, it's our hope that we remain optimistic that the parents also will heal from the traumatic effects. And for those who have died as a result of the traumatic effects, may their souls continue to rest in peace. The government on its own part is endeavoring seriously and tirelessly hard to make sure that they, on their own part, make sure that they rescue and also put a stop to the abductions. Now, from my own opinion, for sure, the political landscape of the country has changed since the Chibok abductions, but that is a cold comfort for the parents of the girls, as I said earlier on, to keep the hope alive that their children will be rescued someday wherever they are and be brought back home alive. In a democratic setting where freedom remains vital, that freedom is diminished for as long as there is a citizen held in captivity. The global security or solidarity demonstrated in the wake of the abductions globally, as you've heard from Favor, from the likes of Michelle Obama, former First Lady of the US, a decade ago, was an ample evidence of our shared humanity locally and globally. That explains why we cannot as a nation afford to give up the remaining Chibok girls. The month of April is another reminder that the authorities must find a solution to kidnapping or abductions to ransom that has made the nation unsafe for many. I'm Odiawa AI, and the show has been Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. With me on the show,
Yes, bye-bye, yeah.
Thanks for watching.